certain things like trauma or addiction will shorten that resilience. And that's when it's easier for those triggers to feel like this is too big for my body. But through healthy coping skills, through self-love, through keeping promises to yourself, through healthy boundaries, cold plunges, like there's so many things, you can actually expand your nervous system resilience.
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I am your host, my name is Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. Today on the show we have Summer Phoenix, the Transformational Coach. Welcome to the show, Summer. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's amazing. Blessing to be alive, blessing to be here.
It's amazing to be alive, right? I know. And when you are triggered by technology, like me today, my microphone not working, and the whole podcast needing to be recorded from the MacBook, then I feel alive. Then I feel life is amazing. But what can we do? We can just laugh at it. So I hope you guys excuse the whatever technical stuff there is, and I hope that it's still good enough quality for you guys, because the most important is the message that we have here for you. And I really set an intention that our podcast, our conversation will bring you a lot of value. So I think that's the most important, no matter if my podcast microphone works or not. Alrighty. So I would love to start with your story. Like, how did you get to be a transformational coach? What has brought you on this path? Because this is where all these hidden gems, are there. And I would love to know more about you, and for all our listeners to know who you are and how you got to, do what you do right now.
Yeah. Amazing. So it's actually, I think it's a cute story because I grew up with parents who are very spiritual as well. My mom does Reiki, and that was something that was talked about to me since I was so young. But as a child, I was very skeptical. Like, so skeptical. I didn't believe a thing they said, and I often would get annoyed. And I was annoyed for a really long time, and I think it was just because of who it was coming from, right? And I would put my blinders up. And I went through most of my life until I hit about age 18 or 19, and I left the home and started to realize, and you start to see things differently when you step out of like where you came from. You start to learn so much more about yourself and so much more about life. And I quit taking all medications that I was on. So I just had this call to do that and to step into a more like natural lifestyle. So I started there with very physical things, getting into yoga. Eventually I had gotten sick. I wasn't like absorbing enough nutrients and getting very lightheaded. And so it started as a very physical thing. And so I started taking care of my physical body. And once I started getting like healthy, my gosh, right? How it's like one thing leads to the other. And I started seeing things on my Instagram Explore page, and all of a sudden somebody was talking about astrology. And then all of a sudden I'm getting my first astrology reading. And it was like a huge domino effect from there. When I got my first astrology reading, it blew my mind that somebody that I didn't know could know me that well. And it opened me up to wanting to give that understanding and that knowledge to other people as well. And so I jumped right into it from there. And then then I'm meeting a community of people, and then I'm discovering this, and then I'm discovering that, and then I've read 10, 15 books, and it starts as this fire, right? That for change, it's like burning, and then you transform, and then you go, and things change, and you start to learn more. And the reason why I love transformation so much, and I really think it's a part of my soul path, was my parents felt called to name me Phoenix. That's my middle name, is Phoenix. And my dad wanted to be my first name, and really understanding like the mythology, the story behind the phoenix of resurrecting, of burning to rise back up from the ashes. I've seen this happen again and again and again within myself. And I start to see, oh, wait, this is something that we all experience, and something that happens on an evolution level as well. And so it's something I'm very passionate about. And that passion carries you really far.
Oh, yes, I can relate to that for sure. And thank you so much for sharing this story. I'm curious to know spiritual from your perspective, because you said you were brought up with all these cool things, right? And sometimes I feel like, oh, it would be so cool if I was brought up with, all these spiritual like stuff, meditation, yoga, and whatever. But oftentimes people say like, yeah, I was brought up like that, and then I kind of completely deny it and disowned it because you were there, right? And people who didn't have it, then they are so hungry for it later, right? Later on in life. And so I'm curious to know, what's your perspective? Like, is it actually, does it make a difference when it comes to if you were brought up with this or not, in terms of like how deep you can go, or how, committed to it you are, or can it actually have like the adverse effect if your parents are very spiritual? How do you see it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think it has a whole effect on how how deep somebody can go with it and how much they can learn about it. I think it really helped me feel into energy, which was really, I didn't realize how much of a gift that was until now that I'm a bit older and much better at attuning to things and to feeling Reiki. But it's interesting when it comes from your parents and you're a child. Um, they're amazing people, but there were things that the the structure of our family lacked. So something as simple as boundaries. So what happens is, as a child, you start to close yourself off from your parents because of this happened, because that happened. And so you start to close off anything that they're telling you. And it doesn't disregard the fact that, like, I learned a bunch of beautiful things, but a lot of my healing came from understanding like something like a concept like boundaries that was not very clear to me as a child. And everybody's family looks really different.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it's an interesting topic, because I've met a lot of people who came from spiritual families, quote unquote, right? Because everything is spirit. So it's quite funny to call anything spiritual, by the way, because everything is spiritual, but let's call it quote unquote spiritual, right? For the sake of this podcast and this conversation. But yeah, I met two kinds of people, ones that were like really into it, and they kind of like went after what parents have brought up, and went straight in it, and some of them were completely like rejecting it and going their own way, and then after some time finding a way back to that, because honestly, like, I feel like everyone will find this way at some point in their life, or life, or next, I don't know, in the next 50 or 100 lives. I don't know when they will find the path to that, but I trust that everyone will, no matter when it happens. So it's an interesting topic to think about, really, when it comes to that. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing, because it just brings more and more curiosity. And I want to ask you, so we were talking about boundaries a little bit. So do you feel like how do you feel like it is formed that people maybe cannot have that strong boundaries, or that people struggle with putting boundaries? Like, what do you feel like is the reason for that, and also how to go about it?
Mhm. I feel like it mostly comes from like a disconnection from themselves. Um, because when you are connected with yourself, it's a lot easier to say yes. It's a lot easier to say no. It's a lot easier to pick out what food you're going to eat on the menu because you know what you're craving. You can listen to your body. You know how to check in with all of these things that shape you. And we were talking about Teal Swan. She uses this analogy that I love, and she's like, boundaries are as simple as, I like strawberry ice cream, so I'm gonna get strawberry ice cream, and you like chocolate ice cream, so you could get chocolate ice cream.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that is because they're so worried about the external world. So it's like, I might not want to say no because I'm afraid of reaction I might get on the outside, or I'm afraid of someone's judgment might get on the outside, and completely lose your own boundaries. And then you're living a life based off of, what's outside of you versus like where your power is, what's inside of you.
Hmm. Yes, I agree with that. And also, I feel like people have a bad association with boundaries, as if it was like a wall or like a barrier or something like bad to state. And of course, then the boundary are a lot of givers in this world and people pleasers who struggle with it, because it's almost like a very unsafe thing to do, because then it feels like you're disconnected from someone and you really want to be connected. as a people pleaser, right? Because this gives you safety. So if you place a boundary, it's almost like like a fence between you and someone, but it doesn't have to be like that. It's just a definition of you in a way. And as you said, like your preferences, your point of view, your stuff, right? What makes you an individual human, healthy boundary
Yes.
in a way, because we're all one anyway. But from this individual perspective, this is what like defines us. So it doesn't have to necessarily be bad, but it might be different to what someone else says. But then people have such a hard time expressing their boundaries. And so what would you say maybe is an example of like boundaries in terms of like expressing it? Because I feel like that's the biggest issue for people, that they feel like if they say no, then it's going to hurt another person. But it doesn't have to be like that, right? You can say no in the most loving, nicest way. And if you speak your truth, then it's not going to hurt anyone, really. If you say, look, I love you and I want the best for you, I feel like I'm out of alignment with this and I'm in alignment with that. And then, you can really frame it in a way that someone is not hurt by what you're saying. So what would your advice be, or maybe like an example of expression of your healthy boundaries in a healthy way, so that it doesn't have to hurt anyone?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because you could be coming from the most loving place and still hurt somebody's feelings, or somebody else's feelings get hurt in that interaction. And it's really about bringing people back to their authenticity, because you want a relationship that's authentic. You want a life that's authentic, right? That should be your number one priority. And sometimes that means that certain people aren't going to be in it, and to be okay with that. And something that's really helped me clarify things is like my internal boundaries and my external boundaries. So external boundaries are like what you're talking about when you express like, hey, I don't like it when you call me that name because this, this. You don't even have to explain yourself. I don't like when you call me that name. Like, I would appreciate it if you like respected me and stopped, right? It's all from a place of love. And someone who's interested in genuinely loving you will look at that boundary and say, oh, they're just doing what's best for them. Like, I can respect that and I can love that, right? And there can be that mutual understanding of we're all doing what's best for ourselves when we are laying out those boundaries. So the expression is different. It can be different in every situation. I've also found that like internal boundaries are just as important as external boundaries. An example of that is like your boss gets mad at you and you're having a tiffy with your boss, but you keep that within you and your boss. You don't take that to the next person that you work with who's saying hi to you and you're like, don't want to talk to them because of something that happened there. It's being able to separate those things.
Absolutely. And I just had something in mind while you were speaking, because there are two things that I want to talk about. One is like, I'm curious about your perspective when, for example, I know that I'm going to get triggered by something and then I'm expressing a boundary. Okay, can you please not say this thing because that triggers my inner child, my trauma, right? And I want to talk about the control aspect of it, because like if you want to control every single trigger and you want to place a boundary so that people don't talk to you like this and like that and like that, because then they're going to trigger the shit out of you, then where is this line where because if you don't get triggered at all, you don't grow. So where is this line, and how to let's say find it, where you are too controlling of like not being triggered and placing your boundaries in a way that you're not going to trigger it for sure, not going to get triggered by anything, right? Versus like, okay, I accept that people might say something that triggers me and it's okay, and I don't have to place a boundary there because I'm open to being triggered and working on myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because things can accidentally trigger us, but then there are some things that people will purposely project on you, and that's when it's like that's the line, I feel like, of okay, I'm receptive to being open to like, what is this person triggering within me that I could heal, versus like this person is completely disrespecting me and is disrespecting my boundaries. And really knowing your inner child wounds, like knowing what came from your trauma brain, the primal brain, that maybe isn't actually even happening in the present moment, but when it's really knowing when are you coming from your trauma brain and when are you coming from like logic and presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is really
Absolutely.
interesting to get into as well. Oops, sorry about that sound.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like apart from what you just said, I will add to that that you need to be again really attuned to yourself to know and have an internal boundary in terms of like knowing, okay, I got triggered already 2 times today. The third time that I get triggered, oh, and my nervous system is gonna be way beyond what I can handle, not handle it. So now I need to place this boundary to not get triggered, but also remaining open to being triggered when it is actually like okay for you to go through the trigger, because like sometimes you might be in such a, you might be so devastated by some external conditions or something that happened, or you might be grieving or whatever, and then in these moments you don't want to be more triggered, you don't want to handle more traumas, you don't want to relive more inner child stuff, you just want to chill and relax. And I feel like again, if you're attuned to yourself and you know what you need and what you want in a moment, if you place a boundary of people not triggering you, that's great. But also, I just want to say, my inspiration for people is not to get too much close in it, to never get triggered, because then it's not the way to just place all these boundaries. Okay, don't talk to me like that, don't do this, don't do that, because then you're so controlling and you actually don't allow for the natural flow of life to bring you the healing that you actually need, right? Because you need the triggers now to bring you back to this subconscious, trauma or whatever else there is. So I feel like the dance between being open and placing your boundaries is the most beautiful, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, because boundaries are something that defines us, but our definition of who we are is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And there actually is like a nervous system resilience. And so certain things like trauma or addiction will shorten that resilience. And that's when it's easier for those triggers to feel like this is too big for my body. But through healthy coping skills, through self-love, through keeping promises to yourself, through healthy boundaries, cold plunges, like there's so many things, you can actually expand your nervous system resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is also
Yes, and
very cool to know, like, oh, this thing that's triggering me so bad right now, it doesn't have to be this way forever. But like you said, there's like a golden nugget in that trigger for us, no matter what the situation is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I've been doing shadow work for so long now that I'm actually super excited to get triggered, and I'm like super happy if someone triggers me. And I give this example all the time, but when I broke up with my ex-partner, I was literally triggering the shit out of myself every single day. Like after we broke up, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna cry about our times and watch all these videos and photos, because I was just like, let's just work through this stuff ASAP, and then I'm not gonna be free of it forever. Let's just work through this abandonment trauma from childhood ASAP, and then I'm done. And obviously it's a process, but I could do it as quickly as I could, and I'm actually really happy that I did it this way. And it's not for everyone. Some people need time to process these things, and they're not as much of a shadow work junkie as I am. Maybe they don't do it that often, because I just love it. I go straight in it. But another thing that I wanted to bring up in what you said before is like that you said that sometimes if you say something in the most kind and loving way, people are gonna still get hurt. But then it's so important to remember that like everyone is projecting their map of the world onto the world, right? So even if people get triggered by you speaking your truth in the most loving and caring and grounded and truthful way, right? Because it's about truth as well and authenticity, as you mentioned. So if you are authentic and speaking your truth and it's like real for you and so on, then even if someone gets triggered, well, this is the best outcome anyway, because the truth is the answer, right? The truth is the key. So without that, it just doesn't make sense to say something else than truth.
Right, exactly. And I love that. And it's such that perception of it is so freeing, right? And it's so inviting too, to just like lean deeper into those things. I love what you're sharing.
Yes, absolutely. And I just love the topic of boundaries because I feel like I'm so good at placing, stating my boundaries. And sometimes I just really, I don't understand when people don't. It's like they're maybe too shy to express themselves. They maybe, too scared of like the judgment or whatever. But really, like the truth is the high vibration. Truth is like throat chakra vibration. It's really the frequency that is healing. So if we don't express it, we actually are gonna go on this downward spiral where we close our throat and then we're gonna speak up less, and then it's gonna go, even more into like lack of self-expression, and then our throat is closed, and then we don't feel like we have flow, we have success, we have expression in our life. So it actually like influences so many aspects of our life if we don't express our truth. So yeah, I just want to inspire all of you who listen to really say it, and say it in the most grounded and loving way as much as you can, and just be ready for consequences, whether you trigger someone or not. It's still going to be the divine plan. If someone gets hurt by that, and maybe they need to go through this trauma, maybe they need to go through this healing, that you bring with your truth. Because yeah, the truth will set us free, as they say. It's cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah.
Right?
Some cliches are spot on.
I know, most of them actually, love is the answer. And so on. Oh my god. Okay, awesome. I'm super happy that we talked about boundaries because I feel like it's such an important topic. But I would really love to also talk about astrology because, as I said before we started recording, I'm really a newbie when it comes to the topic of astrology. I don't really know how to read the chart. I don't really know. I had, a friend of mine, Elaine, who explained a little bit about the planets and how it's all like interconnected with the chakra system and so on. But I don't actually even know the qualities of different like signs. For example, I'm a Scorpio, but what does it mean? I don't freaking know. So would you be happy to like, describe maybe in a short way each star sign and like what it represents? Because I just know that I might be quite emotional as a Scorpio, and I might be quite how do you say, I take revenge or something, but I'm not that person, I guess, or maybe not anymore, I don't know. But yeah, I would love if you could talk about each star sign, at least in short, just a snippet of what, because I guess there's a lot to explore, right? But yeah, I don't know anything about it, so could you please share?
Yeah, yeah. It's a very complex understanding, and I will go into each one and just say a little something about them. It's so interesting, like a Scorpio sun is going to be so different than somebody with a Scorpio moon, the way that it expresses itself, because each planet has a different function in our life, right? So I'll say the qualities of like a Cancer, but someone who has a Cancer sun, it's going to express itself so much differently than like a Cancer Venus or a rising sign that's in Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
even if you go in the astrology wheel, there's 12 houses that each represent the 12 star signs as well. It's a good way to think about it. If you're trying to learn the houses and the signs at the same time, you'll see that the house is ruled by, like, the first house is ruled by Aries. It's because the first house and Aries are very similar in the understanding of it. So Aries kicks it off, right? Because they are very, and it's represented by the ram. So there's lots of symbolism in it and a lot of mythology in it that can help you comprehend it in different ways. Um, Aries is head first. They don't overthink things. They're all about action, impulse. They'll go, and it's a playful, innocent energy, right? Because they're not tainted by like, am I going to get this right or wrong? They're just doing it. It's so inspiring. They're so ambitious for it. And then you move into Taurus, is a lot more grounding. But out of all the earth signs, they're more sensual. They really love senses. Like they want to taste things. They want to feel things. They love bubble baths, their wine, their soft blankets. Because they're very connected and grounded through their senses. They also have an insane ability to understand abundance on a spiritual level. It's really beautiful. Um, Gemini is it's duality, but it's a lot of mental stimulation as well and intellect. Um, they they really do a nice job of like expressing like what seems like duality and how it creates wholeness at the same time. Like that two truths can exist at one time, right? Like that's the Gemini energy. They can love you and hate you, and it's them all in one. And Cancer, very nurturing. It represents it's rules the fourth house, which is all about home. So your sense of home, whether this is within your roots in your family or like your heart home. And also very intuitive, extremely intuitive. All water signs are. Leos they're all about beauty and creativity and fun and pride. Pride in a beautiful way. Very confident, very sure of themselves, and is ruled by the sun. So if you think about that, the energy of the sun, that's like Leo energy. What's next? Virgo. They're very practical. They want to get it right. They want to have everything like perfect and have it make sense and do it the best that they can do. They have high standards, and they oftentimes get called like a perfectionist. But just because they have high standards, they're really smart. So they operate from a different place. They operate from that place of just knowing how intelligent they are. And then Libras are all about harmony. They're big softies, like their aura, Libra aura is like baby blue. I always see it as baby blue. And they love harmony within a relationship. They're really good at that giving and receiving. It's another very sensual sign as well too. They're a little bit like softer. That's next, Scorpio. Scorpios are intense. It's intensity, right? They crave intensity, whether it's like through information or through their experiences. That's often what pulls them into certain things and runs their life is intensity. I call it intensity. It's really beautiful. And they can go deep, right? Because they can handle that intensity. Like they're like, let's cut through the taboos. You're like, let's go with the shadow work, right? Like it's empowering for you, especially as a Scorpio sun. The sun represents empowerment. So like that Scorpio energy is what's going to help empower you in this lifetime. But if we look at your moon sign, that's how you are comfortable processing things and more represents your internal world. So it's really cool to know both of them and how to use it. Well, what's next? After Scorpio, Sagittarius. Sagittarius it's a fire sign. They're all about fun and playfulness and philosophy. They're constantly shooting for like, they're represented by the I can't remember what the name is right now of that creature, but half horse, half man, and they're always aiming for the next thing, the next step above. They want to learn more. They love to travel. Travel is huge for Sagittarius energy for that reason. And then we have Capricorn, which is represented by like a mountain goat essentially. And if you think about the way a mountain goat moves, is this little mountain goat that can get all the way onto like this huge rock. And you're like, how did that mountain goat get all the way up there just taking these itty bitty steps? And that's how a Capricorn moves, like step after step after step after step after step. Like they can reach so many heights because they're patient and like know how to stay efficient on like each little step that gets them there. Aquarius, they're humanitarians. They're very detached in a way that they have a different perspective on life. And that's what's so good about them being humanitarians is that they're not so attached to certain things. They can see it from a different viewpoint. They're weirdos too, very creative, very fun. And Pisces are also very, because when you start to get to the end of the wheel a bit, you're looking at things like the subconscious and like spirituality, and that's what Pisces rules essentially. So they're the most intuitive, but they're going to go outside the box. They're going to do things in a completely different way, and it's good for them to do that. Unconventional. That's the best for Pisces energy. It's just to do it in an unconventional way. But it's really beautiful. It's easy to understand the signs through looking at what element are they. Are they water, earth, air, fire? And then taking it a step further into learning their modules. So this is either cardinal, fixed or mode. And so, like, cardinal signs are Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. They're very progressive thinking. They're very innovative. Like, they're constantly wanting to expand and upgrade. They're really good with ideas, but they don't often follow through and like know how to do all those little things, right? But a fixed sign with like um, Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius, they stay very grounded and like I'm a lot of cardinal energy, so I would call it stubborn, but it's really good for them to do that, to stay really grounded and like focused on one thing and to build up from there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can, because each water sign is going to express itself differently based on whether it's, cardinal X.
That's really
And yada yada.
interesting.
That's like the
That's
easiest
really,
way to
really
go about it.
interesting. I've
Yeah.
never heard this kind of description before in such a simple way. And it's interesting that you say that I am intense, like as a Scorpio, because I describe myself as intense for sure. And sometimes I feel like I'm even too intense for some people. Like some people cannot handle the amount of love I can give or just the amount of like energy that I have because like I'm just so intense. I'm like a bubble of light. I'm like a sun, and I feel like for some people it might be overwhelming or people get scared of my light because it's like, oh, that's too much for me. And so having said that, do you feel like, or maybe you know the examples in your life that some signs are like good together and some signs are not, and if then yes, then if looking at the moon sign only is enough, oh sorry, sun, right, is enough, or if you need to look at the moon and the ascendant and whatever else is there in the chart, or how do you how do you see it? Like, is it necessary to have two astrological charts together and then assess the whole relationship, or can you more or less tell that this sign and this sign, if it's the sun in whatever, then they're not going to work together?
Yeah, I would say I have to look at the whole chart. Absolutely. Especially when it comes to relationships, you want to look at their Venus, their Mars. You also want to look at Pluto and how things play together. Because compatibility is a thing, like that exists 100%. But I also believe that even the complete opposites can be compatible if they're willing to support each
Mm-hmm.
other's differences. If they find like the beauty in their differences, where if it just happens to be a relationship where that can't happen,
Mm-hmm.
it's incompatible. But I would say looking at the whole chart, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to do too. But when my friend starts dating someone new, I'm like, show me their chart. Like, let's take a peek. And it's very helpful. I've seen so many of my clients and so many of my friends better their relationships. And that's why I use astrology, is to teach people not only the relationship with themselves, but how to be in relationship with other people, how to really understand the intricacies of other people as well. So that you can learn to love somebody for who they are, not who you think they should be based off of, your own internal world, your own internal
Yes, and I
mapping.
can relate to that so much because once I checked it with my ex-partner, and actually everything that we checked, everything that the charts told us was so spot on. Like every single thing was like, wow, how does the internet know this? How we are compatible, and you can just input some numbers, and then bang, you have this whole compatibility thing, and it's like, whoa. And I agree that when it comes to compatibility. Even Tilson had a video maybe released, I don't know, a week or two ago about compatibility and sameness. That sameness and compatibility are not the same thing. And she was speaking in the video about like how, sameness can be like both compatible and incompatible. And she was giving the examples of two achievers, for example, right? Where you do both of people, like one man and a woman, want to achieve. They both bring the same value, they both bring money, they both bring status, and in truth they might be more compatible with someone who would appreciate them for their achievements and maybe who they could provide for, and then they would give them something else like nurturing or whatever. So in this way it might not be very compatible to be the same, and maybe they would need something else. But if you think of compatibility as like, for example, the need for variety and traveling and exploration, then if your partner wants to do this too, then obviously there is compatibility, right? But there are so many things we need to look at. And another example she gave that I can really relate to, because I have a lot of friends or people that I have been dating or whatever, that is like that. It's like, I need a lot of connection because my abandonment like I have abandonment trauma, right? So for me, it's like connection is the big thing. But if someone has the avoidant attachment style, right? Because I have anxious. So if someone has avoidant attachment style and they need space, and it's like if they need massive amounts of space and I need massive amounts of connection, then there is incompatibility that is probably not gonna, be. I mean, of course we can learn from each other and we can find the middle ground, but I feel like sometimes it's actually impossible to find this middle way, because sometimes these needs are just too far away from each other. And I'm just wondering, like, do you feel like these kind of things, for example, incompatibility, can it shift the more you heal? Because I feel like if I heal my abandonment wound, right, fully, which I don't know if it ever will happen, but let's assume that I heal my abandonment wound fully, then do you feel like I would not need as much connection? And if this person, let's say that I'm dating a person with the avoidant attachment style, meaning that they need a lot of personal space and they feel safer on their own rather than safe in relationship with someone. Do you feel like if we both heal, then we would be compatible? Like there is a potential possibility to be compatible, or do you feel like I don't mean like let's heal for the purpose of being compatible. It's more like, is there a potential that it would actually work?
Yeah, I think so. Why not? Essentially, why not? But it takes two to tango in a relationship. And I'll speak from experience with one of my closest relationships that I have. I tried so many times, right, because I love this person. This person raised me, right? One of the people who raised me. And I just, you have such a deep bond. But when it's hurting you in these other ways, where they can't respect your boundaries, when they don't leave space for your expression and this and that, the most healing thing I could do was just accept that it couldn't be a thing. It isn't a thing right now, it's not. It can't be a thing, and that doesn't mean that the door is shut for later on, But it takes two to tango in a relationship, and the abandonment thing is really interesting with connection as well, because it is interesting. I'm currently in a relationship where we talk all the time, both really big talkers and kind of like clingy in that way, but we also need space and freedom. And so it's interesting. I feel the most free and like I have so much space with this person who I probably talk to more than I've ever talked to any person I've ever dated. It's really interesting energetic dance as well. And with the abandonment thing, it's like I know that I've kept myself like quiet, and this kind of relates back to my boundaries and like not expressing my truth with somebody because I was afraid that they were going to leave me. And then I realized, oh shit, I need to be much more worried about abandoning myself at this point. Like as an adult, I can't abandon me. I can't do that, like what somebody else chose to do in my childhood, that was based off of their own inner workings. Now I need to make sure that I'm not abandoning myself, right? And that's what it's so empowering to be able to speak your truth, and love yourself
Mm-hmm.
from that place. And then because if people want to come and go, of course it's fucking heartbreaking if you like someone fucking leaves your life. That sucks, right? It sucks. But bigger picture, we're all doing what's best for ourselves, right? Like authenticity, and that can be heartbreaking sometimes, right? There's that quote that says, "It broke my heart, but it fixed my vision."
I love it. I love this
Mm-hmm.
quote. And I can so much relate to that. And I feel like, on one hand, I feel like, okay, if I heal the abandonment wound, I could maybe need connection less. But I feel like I would still prefer it. Like I would still prefer to be connected because I feel like the
Right.
connection is such a basic human need. Like if we don't connect to our parents when we were born, we are pretty much like not surviving. So it's such a ingrained need, biological need that we have, that I feel like sometimes I feel like everyone needs connection, and whether we will heal or not heal or whatever, we still need it. So that's another thing. But yeah, I loved what you said, that it takes two to tango, and I feel like sometimes it's about patience as well, because I am an intense Scorpio, so sometimes I might be impatient because it's like I'm just like, I can't be bothered just working through this shit with someone if I can just find someone who is more compatible for me right now, right? And I feel like it's also about, again, aligning with your true calling inside, like really going deep in the meditation or whatever, just connecting to your heart and connecting to yourself and being like, okay, do I want to keep working on this and work to be more compatible, or do I actually want to find something that is even more aligned with me and not put my energy and focus there? And I always say, like, you need to give it a chance. Like always, it's good to give things a chance, but I feel like if you put so much energy into a relationship and then it's either not reciprocated, or this other person doesn't change anything, or you just feel like, okay, it's like I'm just working my ass off trying to make it work and then it still doesn't, then maybe it would be actually easier and better, because it's not about easy always, but it might be better for you to just leave it behind and just handle the breakup and heartbreak, right? Because these things are hard, but honestly I feel like this, at least for me, the breakup with my ex-partner was one of the most healing things that has ever happened to me, ever. And I would never go as deep into my feelings, into my childhood abandonment wound, if it wasn't for that, because I wanted to be with him so badly that any other person probably in my life wouldn't be able to impose such a big emotional charge for me to go to this specific trauma that was so intense for me. So it was such a blessing, and I feel so much more empowered now that I've gone through it. And we're still friends, like we're still best friends, we're still close, and we just don't speak for a moment, but I know this person is going to be in my life forever because we just love each other so much. And so it's a blessing in disguise, as we usually say, that sometimes if you let go and if you allow all these feelings to come up, all this grief, loss, whatever it is, and you again stay to your boundary and you're like, okay, that's enough of me just going lower and lower in vibration by constantly like being attached to this person or to this outcome of being compatible or aligned. It's like if you let it go, the universe can bring you even more amazing things and even more amazing people, and maybe this person will one day change and then you can be on the same path again. You never know. But if you just leave it up to the universe, then it will probably work out the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it takes you back to like, okay, what do I have control over? This, my vibration. And then from that place, you can trust, right? Trust what comes and trust what leaves. And needing connection less. Like, I don't, no way. Everybody needs connection, but do people really know how to connect? Do people really know how to like attune? It's one of my main focuses is attunement, because I think it goes so far. And when you really are able to connect with somebody and attune to them, things like physical space doesn't um, teeter or have an effect on the relationship, because there's that connection that goes further than that. And I can't remember if I saw this from Teal Swan's thing as well, but she said that sometimes when you're living a more authentic life and that person's not in your life anymore, you actually get to be closer to them. You're actually essentially closer because you're both living authentically than what you were doing like before.
Yes, absolutely. And I have examples in my life of how this worked. Like I recently let go of a 10-year or maybe even 11 years long relationship with my best friend. And the moment that I like separated from his energy, I could feel that it's going to be so good for my growth and for his growth. And it doesn't mean we're going to cross it out and never speak again or whatever. But I really felt that this is the best we could do for both of us at this specific moment. And it has served us so far. And I really believe it will serve us even more. And so let's come back to this theme of attunement, because maybe some people don't really know what it is. So could you tell us a little bit about it and how to do it?
Yeah. I feel like it takes a little bit of practice, but I love doing it with like my animals as well. And it's essentially looking at somebody else and not seeing a difference between the two of you. And so you're like in their, or I wouldn't want to say in their energetic body, feeling, what does this person need? What does this thing need? Where are they at? How are they actually feeling? Is to be able to step outside of yourself into this something else, and to experience what that is. And it goes beyond just like understanding what someone's going through, because you're actually feeling it for yourself. And therefore, like if you there's no separation, there's less harm that we're doing to others, right? Because we know that anything we do to ourselves, we're doing something else. Like, I don't know about you, but if I hit my table or I knock something off, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you're just a physical object, but like, oh my gosh, this is a part of me. And like, I absolutely did not mean to do that to you.
That's funny. But yeah, thank you so much for explaining. And I feel like attunement is one of the best or like most needed, let's say, things that we can do as humans, because like to be attuned and to understand, I feel like also the understanding, the definition of understanding is varies for various people. In terms of understand, usually we associate with the logical framework, right? Understanding logically, but I feel like you can understand logically and you can understand emotionally. And there are two different levels of understanding, because understanding emotionally is attunement as we speak, right? Because you understand, you feel exactly how this person feels. And then it's also a theme, in couples that I know and in my previous relationships or whatever, when one person is more of a logical person, and I usually check it with Enneagram. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this typology, but for me, Enneagram is like my number one typology that I just go to. So if you see Enneagram and you have one logical personality, like I'm a 6-7, it's more logical potential, let's say, and then you have an emotional person, then, for example, there is a fight, and then people go separate ways, and then an intellectual person would say, I felt this and that. And then this emotion, the logical person is like, yeah, I felt this and that. But then the emotional person is like, but you don't feel it. Like you say it, but you don't feel what you're feeling that you're saying. It's like, you don't communicate well. Like you're not, authentic with me. And it's like, what do you mean? I am authentic. I told you I felt like this or that. Like I felt fear. It's like, but you're not feeling fear right now. I cannot understand you. It's just a framework of mind that you're telling me. And the emotional person is like, how can I understand you if you're not feeling what you're saying? And the intellectual person is like, but I'm already telling you, like, how can you not understand that? And I feel like it's such a common theme in relationships to communicate. So that's why I say, like, the wholeness of understanding is understanding intellectually and understanding emotionally, because then you have the whole picture. And I don't feel like you always need to understand it intellectually, because I feel like if you really intuitively feel something and you feel it in your body and you understand emotionally, sometimes you don't need words. But for all these more logical personalities, actually it's easier for them to take in information if you also explain in words. So I always say, and another actually thing that I want to mention, and I'm curious to know if you also see examples in your life of that, it's like the emotional person would for example, say something like really bad and really hurtful to someone, so to someone intellectual, and then for them, it's like, okay, I have an emotion, and I use just like random words that help me express this emotion, right? Even if these words don't really mean exactly what I'm saying, it's like I just need to let out of the emotion. So I'm just gonna say, oh, you're destroying me, for example, right? And it's like, okay, I don't mean that you're actually destroying me, but this is how I feel, so I'm gonna use these words to express my emotion. And then the intellectual person can be like, destroying? Oh my God, like, to destroy someone means this and that. And so then they define it in their mind and they're like, oh my God, like this person's just judging me so much. And, they get so triggered by it. And then I feel like the middle ground is when the emotional person actually learns how to use words for what they mean. And the intellectual person is actually more open to the emotional person expressing their emotions, however, without like defining everything as for what it is in the mind, right? Like to destroy someone doesn't need to mean that they actually destroy their body or their mind or whatever. It can be just, okay, this is an emotion that was expressed in this way. And so I feel like the middle ground is the answer. But do you see the examples of people and communication between people like this in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because as humans, we naturally put meaning to things. Like, who's to say we couldn't call this red? Even though we all know it as orange, but we all only know it as orange because we call it orange. It's interesting. I used to experience this when I used to do hair. People would be like, I want copper. And it's like, I would just say, show me a picture. Because your word copper could mean something completely different than my definition of copper. And so it's being able to get on that same page of understanding, okay, like what did you mean by that? Or like, can you explain that more to me? Or, really getting curious when there is like that disconnect of understanding both people's expression. And I think it's a lot of fun. Like, um, my partner and I right now, like last night, he kept getting wasps in his house. He's like, "Oh, there must be a hole in the screen. There's a hole in the house because there's wasps in here." I take everything super deep. I'm like, "Oh, I think there's a problem with boundaries. If there's a hole in the house and this is like your house and there's something going on with boundaries." And he's like, "That's the opposite of how I would look at it. There's just a hole in the house and there's wasps." I'm like, "Uh-huh. Okay." Like you understand it the way you do. I understand the way I do it. And the world still goes on. We can support each other even in those
Absolutely. And I'm
differences.
team you in this kind of, relation. I always look for deeper meaning in life. So I always relate to like, so what could it mean on the spirit level? What is the metaphysical meaning of this? I'm always big on that. So yeah, I'm with you. So, okay, I have one last little question to you. Where could people find you if they are curious about you and maybe they would like to have a one-on-one session with you or, know more about you? What's the best way to contact you?
Instagram. Instagram definitely is. You can send me a message or through the link tree link in my bio, you'll be able to see some of the services I offer, as well as some amazing programs that I have as well.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for sharing your beautiful energy and your astrological wisdom and everything. I love this conversation. I'm sure that people loved it too. So thank you, beautiful sister, for your contribution to our SoulFam podcast and sending you much love and gratitude.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so, so much, beautiful souls and spirits of this world, for listening to us, being with us, tuning in. If you'd like to find me, I am The Connection Catalyst on Instagram, and you can look for Summer Phoenix as well, just with double X at the end, Summer Phoenix. So thank you for tuning in and stay tuned to the next episode.